Hello and welcome. I'm Tafaragadamu. Attracting a number of actors, the Horn of Africa seems to be at a critical juncture. What is really happening, and how is that affecting Ethiopia? My guest today, Dr. Brook Hailu, has been closely observing the state of affairs in the region. A very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, let's have a bird's eye view of the geopolitical landscape of the Horn of Africa. It's become a little bit too intense.
Yes, it has.
The last year or so.
It has become intense.
And crowded as well.
Complex and crowded, because we have now more and more, countries, especially from the developed part of the world, who had literally moved into the Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb, Gulf of Aden area by establishing even military bases.
You're talking about Somalia, right? I'm in Djibouti primarily.
Yeah. So first, before it also, sea piracy. The whole area was subject to sea piracy for many, many years. All this is the result of the collapse of Somalia as a failed state that has enabled these pirate groups, to mushroom in that area. And then what has precipitated or what has developed in Yemen as well. The struggle among the different political groups in Yemen, and the Houthi are now in power, but they don't control the whole country. And South Yemen can anytime be separated, but not yet. So the whole thing dynamics is complex. And on top of that, what we have now is in this globalized world, more countries, it seems, are now assertive to have a foothold in that area. Even Japan, which is thousands and thousands of miles away. Just to give you not the usual America or the usual, and other European countries. So yes, and also the dynamics has changed. Somalia has moved in, has literally now accomplished or say passed through two peacekeeping missions. AMISOM since 2004, 5, 6, all the way to April 1st, 2022.
And a new one after.
Which will phase out in December after 3 months in 2024. And behold, 1st of January 2025, we have a new mission of a higher level. So that has also attracted so much attention in this area. And on top of that, let's not forget there are small-scale arms trafficking, drug trafficking, global issues. We have illegal human trafficking as well. Migrants following the Libyan route, the Sudanese route, as well as the Bosaso.
All the way across the Red Sea.
Puntland, across the Red Sea. Most from this area, Ethiopians and mostly Eritreans and the like. So that also needs to be considered. And so it's a very, very complex world, the Horn of Africa, plus the population pressure. We shouldn't forget that. Literally in all of these Horn countries, including Ethiopia, which is the largest populous country, 70% are the youth. That itself has become a challenge for the respective governments of each state. You have to provide them with jobs, education, jobs, and a future. The future should not be bleak and dark. They should see light at the end of the tunnel. So what is happening now is that still there is the pull factor of Middle Eastern countries, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Bahrain, and the like. So they try to, across Bosaso, they try to go illegally to that area. That's one route. The other route is via Sudan, which is still, by the way, troublesome area.
All the way to the Mediterranean.
All the way to Libya, Egypt, all the way to Lampedusa in Italy. That's the periphery island of that going to the EU. So we live in this kind of an atmosphere. And Sudan, finally, now we have two military armed groups, struggling against each other. One led by Al-Burhan, the Somali armed, the Sudan armed forces, and then we have Hermiti or Dangalo. From Darfur originally, and who is the head of the rapid, the rapid forces. That is still, not resolved. 50% of the Sudanese people are in suffering. Sudan, Omdurman, literally the major urban centers, all the way to Darfur, to the Chad area, to the west, and to the east, or close to the South Sudan border, are in big trouble. And in Sudan also are involved a number of countries, UAE on this side, Egypt on that side, and the rest. So everybody is involved. So it has become messy sorry for the word, more messier and more complex.
Particularly in the last year plus.
The last year plus, it has become more complicated.
How about Eritrea?
In the case of Eritrea, since Eritrea separated from Ethiopia, de facto became independent, and de jure, after 2 years, based on a referendum, Eritrea is a sovereign country. 7 years until 1997, there was some kind of a lukewarm good relations with Ethiopia, for instance. But after that, one leading into the other, the rivalry and the rest, the currency exchange.
On the 1998 Ethiopian conflict, and then fast forward 20 years later.
20 years later, now we are back to.
And then now.
Now we have Egypt and Eritrea. First Egypt and Somalia, of course. All this, literally, initially what happened was in January 1st, I believe, 2024, Ethiopia signed a memorandum of understanding with the Somaliland government with the aspiration to have access to the sea. That had itself raised a sign of a sandstorm in the neighborhood, so to speak. And one of the spin-off effects is that the current Somali government, is approaching first Turkey and now Egypt to intervene on its behalf, even to send troops.
This has been in the making prior to Ethiopia's agreement with Somaliland, right?
Even before that, it was there. But the signing of the MOU had accelerated the whole thing. It has accelerated it, so it's in a very fast way. One thing is for sure. With Eritrea, as I was about to say that, it didn't go well because Ethiopia aspired to get access to the sea via Assab and Massawa, but that did not materialize. And then there was a problem in the North Ethiopia with the Tigray conflict that had also pitted, the Eritrean regime. They, worked together with the Ethiopian government in Addis based on mutual interests and mutual goals. After that was concluded, now what we have is that it seems the Eritrean regime has changed its strategy and tactics, so to speak, without, of course, delivering the goods, that is opening up its ports and earning billions of wanted revenue, just like that, competing with Djibouti, in a revenue sense way. Eritrea is losing a whole lot of money. That did not happen. But now what we see is that there is this kind of change of policy, so to speak, in Eritrea, whereby there is a belief and a stand that if Ethiopia, in the case of Ethiopia, having access to the sea, that is, in their eyes, unwanted, uncalled for. Plus, it does not seeing Ethiopia in kind of a double way, meaning that Ethiopia is landlocked, full stop. It doesn't need access to the sea. If Ethiopia is accommodated with access to the sea, Ethiopia will be a power. Ethiopia will be a rival and a competitor to Eritrea as well as Djibouti as well as to Somalia. I think when one sees it in the kind of a scenario, it seems it's very hard for Eritrean to stomach the rising economic power, the rising economic power of Ethiopia, because its economy is growing like crazy. And it used to be Kenya as number one in East Africa. What the economy of Ethiopia is that Ethiopia has gone way beyond Kenya, and it's like the pull factor. The whole economies of Eritrea, Djibouti, Sudan, and South Sudan are being pulled into the bigger orbit of the Ethiopian economy. So I think the Eritrean regime right now is apprehensive of the rising might or the rising power of Ethiopia. And from my point of view, having access to the sea, from the geopolitical sense point of view, they feel threatened. I don't think it's correct, but they feel they are being challenged by the Ethiopian presence in the Red Sea. So it seems they are not ready to see Ethiopian commercial, civilian, by the way, maritime ships, plus the expected future Ethiopian Navy to operate from the south so absolutely from South Suez Canal all the way to Bab el-Mandeb and to the Gulf of Aden.
So what brings the Egyptians to Somalia? I mean,
a very good question.
Is it the GERD?
It is the GERD.
Or is there something else too?
It is primarily, as a political science, it is the GERD. Because
Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam.
Because they feel that Egypt is losing its water, which is not the case. They feel that they are destined to control every drop of the Nile water as a resource. Repeatedly, it seems they are blind to the fact that Nile begins in Ethiopia. 86% of the water of the Nile is emerged from Ethiopia. They simply put aside the very fact that even based on international law, Ethiopia has the right to develop and to utilize and use the Nile as long as it doesn't stop the flow of the water. By the way, naturally, the law of nature, it's impossible. Yeah. I don't see why they are scared about that. So they feel that they need to pressure and break and even use the current opportunity of lack of peace in some areas of Ethiopia as an opportunity to squeeze Ethiopia into, so to speak, submission, as well as into changing its policy regarding GERD.
Do you see the Egyptians having a major role when this current peacekeeping force based in Somalia leaves at the end of this year? Do you think their role?
Well, the current Somali government had literally openly declared they want to change the Ethiopian peacekeeping, Ethiopia is contributing country, replace it by Egypt. So they have clearly said that. Starting from AMISOM and ATMIS, Ethiopia is one of the 5 contributing countries besides Uganda, Burundi, Kenya, and Djibouti. They want to push elbow out Ethiopia in that respect. By the way, truth has to be told. Ethiopian troops and Ethiopia has paid the sacrifice. Ethiopia has contributed a lot for bringing this failed state into at least some kind of a state apparatus where you have now at least a transitional federal parliament, transitional federal government, a federal arrangement is in place. You have regional states, Southwest State, you have Hirshabelle, you have Jubaland, you have Puntland, which has, by the way, already existed before, and you have the breakaway Somaliland. So Ethiopia has really played a role in the last EPRDF government. As you know, Al-Shabaab fighting Al-Shabaab. Because Al-Shabaab had totally liberated, from their point of view, the whole of Somalia, with only Baidoa, as I recall. And it was at this moment that the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Meles Zenawi, decided, and as a policy decision, Ethiopia began to push. So I think the survival of Somalia literally depended on Ethiopian contribution. That is literally now being ignored. First. Secondly, the Somali reality has changed totally. Now,
in what sense?
In what sense? A great question. In the following sense. Now we have regional states. The southwestern state president totally opposes the presence of Egyptian troops in Somalia. Jubaland had also declared that. Hirshabelle had also declared that. So it seems the majority of the regional states oppose what the federal president is doing. So there is already a contest or a rivalry between two forces, one the national federal, the other regional states. They even favor Ethiopian troops, and they openly declared that Ethiopian troops had maintained peace and security for the last 17 years in Somalia, not only fighting Al-Shabaab, but also digging wells, building roads, building hospitals, sharing their rations, food, and being orderly, without engaging in some kind of scandals like we see in UN missions across the world. So they have a sort of literally have a developed a good reputation. So they want the continued presence of Ethiopian troops, while the federal government is saying we want to replace it. So that is still an unresolved issue, because now and more in Mogadishu, even in parliament, the parliamentarians who come from regional states, they are opposing the president's view. So my prediction is they are trying to reverse the decision of the president by imposing pressure on him. First and foremost, they are already put his cabinet under pressure. The prime minister will be gone, I predict, in the coming few weeks, because he's losing support within parliament. Although he's named by the president, he has to have the backing of the Somali parliament. So it's not an easy thing. So this. Another point that I would like to share with you is the role of the Egyptians. Yes. In what way and manner, as well as in what strategy are they going to follow by their presence in Somalia? Is it a direct kind of a way, or is it an indirect way of influencing Ethiopia? Because from what we see since last week, the Egyptians are now, it seems, ready to arm, to support, media support, finance, money, media, and everything to any opposition group, Ethiopian-based opposition group. They are ready to do that just like they did 35, 40 years ago to OLF and other liberation fronts and national movements. So I think it seems they have opted now to have adopted a tactic to put pressure to sow disunity, to sow lack of peace in Ethiopia by arming and supporting opposition groups rather than directly, because Ethiopia is a formidable opponent. A formidable opponent, and history testifies that many times the Egyptians have tried to control the source of the Nile, whether it's the Battle of Gundit or Battle of Gura. Every time they have been soundly defeated by Ethiopians, and the Egyptian presence being a rallying point as well to rally all around the Ethiopian people, even different opposition groups, to come together. So I think they know that handling Ethiopia is better with care, and influencing and breaking Ethiopia, quote unquote. We'll see whether they will succeed, is by using indirect tools, so to speak, rather than direct military challenges.
How do you see this tugs of war, if you will, in this region play out in the next 10 years, in your opinion?
Anything goes in politics. Mr. Tafarra, states might expand, states might collapse, the states might break apart. That's how politics sees it. Of course, there is a reason. There are factors, internal, external factors for that. Let's see, in the case of India, Pakistan has been out. So West and East Pakistan, and then the East Pakistanis wanted their own state, so Bangladesh was born in 1975. So there are so many instances. Sweden and Norway. Norway broke apart from Sweden. So now what we have is that Somaliland, which was a former British colony, which had experimented for a few days to join with Italian Mogadishu, Somalia, is saying no more. So although de jure they are not legally sovereign nation, de facto, just like Eritrea, the two countries were born in the same vicinity or in time perspective. One is recognized, legally and de facto and de jure, because Ethiopia at the time even volunteered to send application by Prime Minister Meles. The other is countries are not daring to break the ice, to recognize it's the first, as we say, to break the ice and recognize Somaliland, and the rest would follow. Because the American Republican now would be, they have expressed interest that America, Norway, Denmark, UK, they are ready to recognize Somaliland. Whether it's going to be Ethiopia or not, time will tell in the coming few weeks. So the point is, Somaliland is gone, from my point of view. It will never to re-emerge with Somalia. Puntland also had shifted its strategy. They are now so disappointed with the behavior and decisions of the Somali federal government by inviting Egypt. They totally opposite that Puntland. They are now considering their independence call, just like Somaliland. As you recall, Mr. Tafarra, at the time, 20 plus years ago, they even aspired to join Ethiopia and even expressed interest in a confederal way to join Ethiopia under the Meles Zenawi regime at the time. So now anything goes. Then you have asked me the next 5-10 years. We might see more and more states being born, like in the galaxy, new stars being born. So Somaliland is already there. Puntland might separate. We don't know whether Hirshabelle would separate, and eventually they separate and they need alliances and partnership. Anything goes. Somaliland and Puntland can't even join Ethiopia. And nothing can stop that. So I think
it's pretty much fluid.
Expect pretty much such kind of scenarios. The same thing for Eritrea. Now the Eritrea has taken a position. If there is some kind of a conflict, you'll never know how that conflict would end, because there are regrets, there are this, there are that. We'll never know whether the Eritrea that we know today will continue as it is, especially south of Massawa. So anything goes. So that's how political science, and as a political scientist, one would say that. Yeah.
How about Sudan?
Sudan, a great question. I'm glad you asked that. Darfur might split from Sudan, by the way. the Darfurians, the people of Darfur, they might split from Sudan. Sudan, I think, from my point of view, is still in a process of decay, in a process of collapse. So unless you have a strong central regime in Khartoum that will fulfill the aspirations of Darfur people, if they don't respect the self-determination aspiration of the Darfur people, they have political movements that aspire to separate from the Sudan. So I expect Darfur might split the road, and Sudan will continue in turmoil. And by the way, the same thing with the Beja people in the Sudan. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your insight. It was really a pleasure having you on my show, Professor Brook.
Thank you, Tafar.